Welcome to Wheels and Wheels, and in today's episode, we are going to be reviewing my very own Suzuki Jimny. It's been a year, and I've clocked more than 15,000 kilometers with this car. To say the least, I've thoroughly enjoyed my ownership experience. So before we get started, here's a loud disclaimer to clear it out. The Mahindra Thar Petrol is a much superior car than the Suzuki Jimny. It's got the butch looks most of you expect from an SUV, and that terrific turbo petrol engine has no competition in the segment. With that said, who is the Jimny for? The Jimny is a simple off-roader which simply works for simple people. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. There's a Japanese saying which translates into less is more. This can't be more closer to the true essence of the Jimny. Jimny has a rich legacy and history dating all the way back to the 1970s when the first generation was launched. The current outgoing model is the fourth generation, and the really well-known Gypsy is the second generation of this car. The third generation didn't make it to India, but it was also a worldwide hit for the capabilities it offered. When it comes to design, you're welcomed by a super compact boxy design derived from the three-door Jimny. The Jimny doesn't try one bit to come across as a tough-looking SUV. Rather, it tries to charm you with its old-school retro appearance. Those rounded headlights and smooth transitions running all across the body makes it a real head-turner for being so charming and approachable. As with most off-roaders, what you get with the Jimny is a ladder frame chassis, which makes it more robust and repairable without compromising on frame integrity. You cannot compare it with the monocoque chassis, which is far more silent and aerodynamic compared to this boxy design of the Jimny. For those of you bashing the Jimny for being so compact, get the Mahindra Thar, like I previously said. The Jimny's different take on off-roaders. What this compact and boxy design allows you to do is to maneuver through the smallest of gaps and fit into the tiniest of parking spaces even within the city. I always wanted to get myself a red or white Gypsy, but the Jimny in kinetic yellow made me disregard all my preferences. Though subjective, I can vouch for the fact that the Jimny in kinetic yellow is the most striking color available. Build quality is pretty decent, and these plastic fenders around the car have aged pretty well as they've taken quite a lot of abuse without budging or breaking. There's an issue with this roof, which tends to give out a knocking sound when exposed to extreme temperatures. It's a recurring issue which I've tried fixing with Maruti multiple times, but to no avail. Coming from a history of owning European cars, the door thud never feels reassuring, and you tend to expect more from it, but it's definitely better than most other Maruti cars out there. Initially, I was a bit skeptical about the plastics used on the door as well as on the dash, but they seem to have held up pretty well as they don't tend to scratch very easily. So I've done up the interiors with custom seat covers, or you're otherwise left wanting with pretty basic fabric seats that are just not justifiable for the price point this car sells at. Seat comfort is just okay. There's a lack of lumbar support and under-thigh support, which means that you will have to take a break every 100 odd kilometers. It's pretty much the same story at the rear end as well. The seats just lack comfort, and I wouldn't advise you allowing your older parents to take the back seat, so you can just save it for your kids. The sound system is just plain terrible in stock, and these are one of the very few things I upgraded. I went for a two-way passive setup that sounds great in city speeds, but when traveling at triple-digit speeds on the highway, due to a lot of wind noise and road noise creeping into the cabin, it's not a great listening experience. Another glaring miss is the lack of load sensors in the rear seats, which means that you have to keep hearing an annoying beep for close to 90 seconds, even when nobody is sitting at the rear end. This is just unacceptable for a car in this segment. So the boot space is pretty decent, and you can pack for a week with your family. You do get the option of the 60-40 rear seats, which allows you to pack a lot more by compromising on a passenger. Now let's cut to what really matters. It's fair to say that the Jimny has two distinct personalities, on-road and off-road. When it comes to on-road, let's look at how the Jimny performs in the city as well as the highway. So what's powering the Jimny is a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated K15B engine. That's a generation older than the K15C, which is the current outgoing model. But I wouldn't call this a compromise purely because the K15B offers more low-end grunge as well as drivability compared to the K15C, which is tuned more for efficiency. Being a naturally aspirated engine, it's a very smooth drive experience, but what you don't get is that push you get from a turbocharged engine. The engine's got enough to make you feel happy in the city with a good low to mid range, but on highways, it just lacks the top end grunt that is required to cruise around at 120 kmph. So if you expect more from the Jimny on the highways, it just can't. But what you do get is a smooth drive experience along with its Japanese reliability. The dull throttle response and lack of impetus when overtaking makes it a daunting task every single time. You have to really watch out and plan your overtakes very carefully. There is just less power and torque on tap once you cross the mid-range, and all you can hear is the engine crying out loud, "I'm not built for this." The steering mechanism is a recirculating ball type as opposed to rack and pinion system you find in more front-wheel drive cars. So what this means on the city and highway is a very lethargic steering experience which comes with a lot of understeer. While it may seem adventurous at the start, in the long run it becomes quite tiresome. Adding to this is the large turning radius for a very compact car, which makes U-turns very difficult in city. When it comes to transmission options, you're left to choose between a 5-speed manual and a 4-speed AT. Yes, you heard it right. It's a 4-speed AT in 2025. But if you can look past the spec sheet, the 4-speed AT offers a smooth and a worry-free driving experience, which is my pick in the city. The manual just doesn't feel precise when slotting in, and there is an issue when engaging the first gear or the reverse gear. The AT doesn't have the zip the manual offers, but at least it's a bulletproof setup that you can count on every single time. If your driving predominantly involves the highway, you might want to go for the manual because the AT makes you feel helpless with nothing left to squeeze from this very small engine. So either way, take it easy on the highway, and once your audio upgrade is done, keep it at the 80-90 mark so that Jimny will reward you with good mileage and peace of mind. The suspension is super plush, and what that means is that you can sail through pretty much anything and everything on bad city roads. It makes you feel quite invincible. But the very same setup on highways makes the Jimny float around quite a bit, and even mild cornering can seem like a dangerous stunt to pull off. Braking is also not very confident inspiring, and the same suspension setup paired with these brakes makes the car nosedive every time on hard braking, which pushes the momentum forward. This in turn creates more dangerous situations that you wish you were not a part of. Efficiency is not a great story to write home about, and you can expect an average around 8 to 9 kmpl within the city and 13 to 14 on the highway. But it can soon turn into a horror story if you're not careful with the throttle input or if you're caught in a traffic congestion. I might be losing a little more on efficiency due to my upsized tires, but even with the stock configuration, I don't think I'm going to see a marginal increase because of how the engine and gearbox work together. The manual is going to give you better mileage figures definitely, but again, a rear wheel drive with a very small engine is not going to be the most efficient car that you can drive. The stock tires are Bridgestone 195 section highway tires, which is just absurd for a car of this nature. Though they are pretty adequate on the city and the highway, that brings me to the first question: who buys a Jimny for the city and the highway anyway? If you're one of those people who uses the Jimny for city and highway purposes, feel free to let me know your ownership experience. But if you ask me, I would say the Jimny is just not a happy car in the highway and city. You have to take the Jimny where it truly belongs to. The Jimny thrives where the road ends. And if you manage to experience this at least once, nothing said before this will ever matter to you. Everything less about the Jimny on the road is more off the road. Small in footprint, less in weight, makes the Jimny truly a mountain goat, able to scramble up even the narrowest of terrains without blinking an eye. The compact dimensions and short wheelbase gives you absolute control over knowing where both your wheels are, and even if your Jimny is stuck, 4 or 5 people can easily pull your Jimny out true to its gypsy genetics. The ride quality of this plucky little off-roader is just mind-blowing. The three-link suspension lets you scale through the toughest of terrains with utmost confidence and peace of mind. I've never felt the Jimny lacking power off-roads because of its excellent power-to-weight ratio and low-end grunt that the K15B offers. So the Jimny doesn't hustle its way through the obstacles like a Mahindra Thar or a heavily built SUV. Rather, it glides through, adhering to basic principles of gravity and traction. So in simple terms, gravitational force is nothing but the downward force applied on the mass of an object. Traction is simply the grip offered by the tires when you're trying to move the vehicle across the surface. So traction is naturally higher on rough surfaces and lesser on slippery surfaces due to lack of contact points between the tire and the surface. Elements such as water, slush and mud act as barriers or natural barriers to reduce the traction and grip between the surface and tires. The four-wheel drive setup works by distributing torque to all four wheels. In an ideal situation, you want equal torque on all four wheels, but in an open differential, that's not always the case. A differential is a mechanical device that you find on most cars that allows both wheels on the same axle to spin at different speeds. Where this helps is when you're cornering, your outer wheel actually needs to cover more distance than your inner wheel, which means that your outer wheel needs to cover more distance at the same time your inner wheel covers that shorter distance. So for time to be constant, one parameter needs to be variable, that is speed. So your outer wheel is actually spinning much faster than your inner wheel around the corner to maintain the same trajectory. That's the function of the differential. So this particularly works against the car off-road, and in situations where one or two wheels lose traction, your torque gets automatically directed to that particular wheel because it's a path of least resistance. So that's the reason you find the wheel losing traction actually spinning much faster than the wheel that has traction. So to combat this, there are several differential locking mechanisms, mainly like MLD, LSD, and the one we have on the Jimny is the BLD, which is called the brake lock differential. So the BLD works alongside the ESP to detect if there's any slippage in any of the wheels losing traction. And once the slippage is detected, it applies a braking force to that particular wheel, causing the torque to be redistributed to the other wheels that have traction. So this allows the car to tread along the path just using the wheels that have traction. The four-wheel drive setup works by selecting between the 4L and the 4H setup. For beginners like me, if you want the maximum torque to be delivered at the lowest speed possible, say less than 20 kmph or even less than 30 kmph, switch to the 4L because that gives you the best chance to clear any obstacle at low speeds. But in case you do have a bit of a run-up and you do have the chance to gather some momentum before clearing that obstacle, go for the 4H because that gives you a little more speed to cross over that obstacle with little more momentum. The ESP intervention is quite high, and even when you try to switch it off, engaging the 4H, it switches itself back on with speeds greater than 30-35 kmph, which renders itself useless in situations where you just need that little bit more push. So this is where you will have to switch over to the 4L where the ESP is completely switched off. So is this the best way? Well, definitely not, because there are a lot of exceptions as to when you should engage 4L and 4H. It depends on a case-to-case scenario and a driver-to-driver scenario. While some enthusiasts might always stick to 4L on all occasions involving off-roading, I would say put yourself out there and learn it your way, so that it depends on your capabilities and what your car can do. So coming back to the things that are not so great on road, like the sluggish steering, is actually excellent off-road because it dampens everything from potholes to the rockiest of terrains without giving you any kickback. And the Jimny does come with a steering dampener as well. The sluggish throttle response on road is a boon here, as you can modulate the pedal very minutely without the car lunging forward. Even for off-roading, I would suggest going for this 4-speed old school 80 because it just works seamlessly and the gear shifts are very precise with enough power on tap to clear any obstacle. The last thing you want when you're off-roading is your gearbox stalling you, which the manual did a few times, and you do risk burning your clutch if you're a beginner like me. If you're an experienced driver, definitely the manual might be a better choice because you know what you're doing. And there are many situations where the manual might help you rock your car to come out of the obstacle, as well as there are certain limitations to the 80 where your 4L is capped at 65 kmph, where your car is not going faster than 65 kmph at the 4L gear ratio. Now you might ask me who does these speeds at 4L, but in situations where there is no traction but there is wheel spin, what you can see is that your speedo is still giving you an indication of how fast your car is going, though it's not discernible, which means that your car at 65 kmph might not be moving as fast, but your wheel is still spinning. This limitation is not there with a manual, where you can power your way out of a swamp or through a large sand dune, even at speeds higher than 65 kmph with the 4L engaged. There is a workaround with the 80 gearbox, which a few enthusiasts have pointed out, which is engaging the maintenance mode, which I personally haven't tried out and I'm not going to either. But like I said, it's for those very few exceptional cases where an experienced driver might be more comfortable with a manual. But for everyone else, the automatic is my pick. There are quite a few areas where the Jimny could have done better off-road as well. But then a Jimny is a global product and you do have an endless support of products to keep upgrading your Jimny. From lift kits to turbo kits, from across the globe, the limitations of what your Jimny can do is only in your head. It's been a year filled with quite a lot of traveling as well as off-roading, and I'd have to say the car has held up pretty well. There's not been any squeaking or rattling whatsoever. After sales and service has been a mixed bag. There's been a steering wobbling issue at 80 kmph that was rectified by replacing the kingpin and the rotors free of cost. But the roof knocking issue, which I had mentioned earlier, still does persist. The one thing you should never do is try repainting your Jimny at an Nexa service center, especially if it's kinetic yellow in color. The technicians are pretty clueless on even matching the right paint shade, and overall the body shop experience was nothing short of a nightmare. Overall, the cost of ownership and annual services has been a very affordable and smooth sailing experience, to say the least. The verdict. Straight away, I'm going to rule out the Jimny for purely city and highway purposes. But if you're someone who lives in the city, just waiting to hit the trail every time you get the chance, this is the car for you. You will love the Jimny for its off-road capabilities that come in a city-friendly package. The Jimny is best suited for those who live in the narrow foothills, ghats, or hilly terrains that require a daily bit of off-roading and trail driving. It shines being agile and fast in these narrow and tough roads where most of the conventional cars struggle. It's the perfect mountain goat for everyone seeking a bit of adventure in your otherwise mundane life. The best part of owning a Jimny is the absolute peace of mind knowing that the cost of spares are ridiculously affordable. You break your front bumper while off-roading, expect a replacement cost of just around $2,500. Let that sink in. Everything thought to be less about the Jimny is consciously engineered to do the most where it belongs. To underestimate the Jimny for not having a great spec sheet is your misplaced perception about this plucky little off-roader that wills you to push beyond your beliefs and be amazed every single time with the memories you make where the road ends.